G'day, Battlers, and today we're jumping back in for another Go Battle League meta, this time the Summer Cup Ultra League Edition. So just the same as the Summer Cup we've had for the last week, this time just one league higher. So normal, fire, water, grass, electric, and bug typings, 2500 CP, and running from June 9th through June 16th. So it's going to be alongside Great League, so for those Great League enjoyers, you've still got that meta to play with. You don't have to jump into this one if you don't want to, but you know, in these early ranks where you don't usually have ELO, I mean, you might get ELO this week, you know, you've got a bit more room to play around with if you sort of want to give this meta a go, a little bit stress-free, then you definitely can. But if you just want to play Great League, then, you know, that is there for you as well. But before we jump into it, I do want to plug one thing, that being the live stream we did a week and a bit ago, the World Champion Brawl. If you are interested in seeing some very high-class battles, we got the World Champions from the Play Pokemon circuit and the Silph Arena, put them in one round robin and made them duke it out, and it was definitely a very exciting thing to watch. So if you do want to see some high-class battles in the lead up to the World Championships this year, definitely do recommend that. So that link's going to be in the description down below. Feel free to check it out after this if you want to. That's for the thumbnail. Now, we've got three main groups on the graphic. The fighters, the anti-fighters, and the anti-anti-fighters over in the bottom left. And I will sort of peek back the curtain a little bit because I originally had a graphic that had 4 groups on it. I'd recorded the video, and then I sort of kept looking at the graphic, and I was like, this settles down into just 3 groups, doesn't it? So I remade the graphic and we're redoing the video now, but it really does come back to that just really basic relationship that is sort of all through PvP in fighter, anti-fighter, anti-anti-fighter. And that's sort of the relationship we're seeing here. So we have the fighters with Double, Buzzwole, and Virizion. Double, while it doesn't have the fighting typing, it has a fighting fast move, and then its big damage is really being put on by the Body Slam. You've got some moveset options there. You could run with Payback or Wild Charge. PvPoke recommends Payback, but I personally feel like Wild Charge has a lot of play in this meta because there are so many water types like Walrein, like Tentacruel, like Mantine, and just hitting back those flyers like Pidgeot. It feels like a Wild Charge gives you a lot of play. So personally, I'm sort of on team Wild Charge, but I think that you can sort of go either way on that. Buzzwole has the bug typing as well as the fighting typing, so it is double weak to the flying moves. So, and there's pros and cons there. Pros because if you're taking more damage, then the flying types get less farm on you. But you know, you're still not in a great spot there. And Virizion is sort of like the highest ranked fighter on the PvPoke rankings, I believe. And it's sort of, I think there's another moveset question where it's got 3 sort of main moves you can use in this meta. Sacred Sword, which is Legacy. So if you don't have a Legacy Virizion or don't want to use an Elite TM, then ignore this one and you'll use the other 2, being Leaf Blade and Stone Edge. Now, Stone Edge obviously going to give you counterplay against the flyers. Leaf Blade going to give you some really nice coverage against things like Swampert, like Lantern, like Walrein. And then Sacred Sword, I mean, you're still getting that super effective damage against Walrein, and is a little bit more of a neutral move. And I think PvPoke currently recommends Sacred Sword, Stone Edge. I'm a really big Stone Edge enjoyer in this meta in particular, where flyers are going to be important. I feel like Leaf Blade Stone Edge has a lot of argument, but obviously, like if you only have one Virizion built and it's got Sacred Sword, you don't really want to remove the Elite TM move. So like it sort of depends a little bit on what materials you've got, and really you can sort of build a team with any combination of those moves and you'll be just fine. So you don't need to make any big investments if you don't want to. But then if we come down to the anti-fighters, we have the flying type, so things like Mantine, Zapdos, Charizard, and Pidgeot. Then we have Tentacruel, who has the poison typing, so poison typing resisting the fighting moves, and then also packing generally a Scald Sludge Wave is sort of the recommended. Scald, you're hitting all of the things like, I mean, you're hitting fire types, which there's not a lot of in this meta, Victini being one of them, but then also Charizard. You've also got some ground coverage, and it's sort of just a high damaging move. Sludge Wave is sort of just a neutral move for everything else. So it's got other move sets, like it's got access to Blizzard, which could be really spicy and really nice up against a flying type, for example, but then you're really walled by things like Walrein, but like, you know, you're really going to be stuck if you have Scald, Blizzard, and you're against a Walrein. You're just not going to be able to do much. So there's sort of reason to go for Sludge Wave instead. So also got Acid Spray, if that's the type of moveset you like to use. Again, it's one of those things where it wouldn't be something that I would recommend to like a first time player, but if you're sort of experienced and you know how Acid Spray works, you're familiar, you're happy to play Acid Spray, then I think that that's a very viable option. And then Victini is a little bit weird. Generally, it is going to be tackle V-Create, where V-Create giving you that big fire damage obviously hits things like Buzzwole and Virizion hugely, and it's just a really good neutral move, but it does debuff you. There's argument to be made. You could run Confusion instead of Tackle as the fast move, and you'd be getting that super effective damage onto the fighters. Not double again, because double has the normal typing, but then you're doing less charge move damage, and so it's sort of, and you're also doing super effective to things like Tentacruel with the poison typing. So I think there's argument to be made for Confusion, and again, it's going to depend sort of how you want to build your team. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, like, Victini isn't some meta destroyer. It's relatively high on the PvP poke rankings, which is sort of why it's here, but you know, I think Victini could be a leave at home sort of option. Especially because I think a lot of people, like, we've only had one Victini, and a lot of people, me included, are leaving their Victinis in the Great League. So, you know, I think Victini isn't something that you have to think too much about in this meta, but just sort of be aware that it's there. And then over on the, I mean, I didn't actually talk about the other flyers. Pidgeot, it's number 1 in the rankings, but it's a bit of a sim hero because you're landing Brave Birds. Charizard, really high attack stat, and a very scary if you have an energy advantage or a shield advantage. Sort of one step scarier is Zapdos, who does even more damage and is even more glassy. So you can sort of, like, if you're in a 2-0 shield advantage, Zapdos can basically take out anything in the meta except Unova Stunfisk. Unova Stunfisk is crazy scary for Zapdos. It's like one of the worst Pokemon. I have some very vivid memories from the 2021 Sylph Arena All-Star Invitational, where Zapdos versus Unova Stunfisk was just, like, devastating for the Zapdos. So, you know, it's an option. And Mantine, sort of a bit of a neutralish pick, where it's got that water typing, so you're weak, really, really weak to electric damage. But you've got a fair variety of movesets you can sort of throw. You've got, I mean, Bubble Beam is sort of the always bring, because you're able to debuff things, and it's a little bit more consistent. And then as the secondary move, you could go for Ice Beam for the anti-fly coverage, or you could go Aerial Ace for the anti-fighter coverage. It's sort of, again, a little bit dependent on how your team composition is looking. And then you have the anti-fighters down in the bottom left with the electric types. So we've got Galvantula, Unova Stunfisk, and Lantern. So those three are obviously going to be hitting Mantine and Tentacruel extra hard, while also doing really well against the other flyers. You've got Walrein with the ice typing, so you're able to hit the flyers with that. But then you also have Earthquake, which can hit both Victini and Tentacruel really well as well. So you've got some really nice coverage there. You've got Miltank with Rollout hitting the flyers, and then you've got Thunderbolt, which can hit that Tentacruel again. And then you've got Swampert in there, who sort of just fits in here. It does that neutral damage. It hits the fighters, hits the flyers, hits the fires. Like, you've got Earthquake that could hit Tentacruel as well. You know, and Swampert is just a neutral pick, and it does okay up against the fighters as well, unless you're up against Virizion with Leaf Blade. So, like, Swampert is a really good pick in this meta for sure. But, I mean, with that said, that's sort of the general baseline of the meta. Again, these arrows are just sort of suggestive. There are definitely a lot of places where Pokemon sort of win the matchup backwards. So just as an example, I'm trying to pick an example here, but like Mantine versus Swampert, I think that generally goes in Mantine's favor. So, like, don't sort of take this as gospel. This is just sort of giving you a baseline to give a sort of basic understanding of the Summer Cup Ultra League meta, so that you can sort of build your teams, have some success, watch some other content creators' videos to get an idea about sort of what teams are good and that sort of thing. But yeah, that is my Meta Simplified infographic. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, especially that subscribe one. Again, check out the World Champion Brawl if you haven't already, because it's definitely a really, really fun watch. And yeah, thank you to my patrons and YouTube members as well for their support, because they are absolutely brilliant people. And I will see you in the next one.